I really love your album. It's a very unique take on Stephen Sondheim's work. And I think a lot of people are going to find it really refreshing. So I want to start by asking you, do you remember the first time you ever heard any Stephen Sondheim song and what it was and how you heard it?
What a great question. Well, I'm going to narrow the question down to Sondheim, both music and lyrics, because Gypsy was West Side Story. West Side Story would be the first Sondheim lyrics I heard, and then Gypsy. And I probably heard Forum. The first Sondheim and Sondheim was thanks to Liz Calloway and Anne Calloway seeing Company when we were in high school together. Their parents took them to see Company in New York, and Liz, had us all sit down and listen to that album. And I thought, what angry people, what caustic, angry people singing about. It was unlike any kind of musical theater I had ever heard. Was the world in the way he wrote. And I was intrigued and dazzled and humbled and intimidated. And I pretty much stayed in that bucket until I was 51. It was the first time I really had the courage to venture into actually performing his music. I've always been intrigued and dazzled and humbled by the original cast recordings of his shows. I always feel like they belong to those singers. They belong in that world. So it wasn't really until I started around, I was a little older than 51, maybe 52 or 3, when Katie Sullivan suggested that she and I do a Sondheim show together. And at that point in my life, I had the wherewithal to say, I love you, Katie, but I'm not in love with you. So if we're going to do this together, I would like to sing my truth through his lyrics. And that would also open a whole world of songs that were written for women to sing that I can sing without changing the pronouns. And that was the beginning of the first time I ever performed as an openly gay man on stage through the courage and ammunition that his lyrics gave me. And the first time I ever really tapped into his songbook. So I was late to the party, but I've been a fan since there were cast albums. Since those found my way into my record collection.
Well, you might have been late to performing the songs, but had you always heard something in the songs that was maybe other than what other people were hearing?
Yes, I'd never heard human emotion. I couldn't express it that way in high school, but I'd never heard characters, adults, singing about life with that kind of. I mean, I was living in the Midwest. I went to high school in the Chicago suburbs, so I really didn't encounter people like Elaine Stritch in my neighborhood. I mean, and Barbara Berry. I mean, I had just never heard anything quite like that, but I was dazzled by it. Really is the word. And I'm also a big fan of production value, and that set, the photographs that I saw of how that production was mounted, I just loved the mechanics of it. The first show I saw of his was Sweeney Todd, and that production, 1979, that was all the bells and whistles. That was, I grew up loving horror films. Back then it was not A Star Is Born on my wall. It would have been, Boris Karloff or Bela Lugosi. But that combination of a horror story with his writing and then that physical production with Angela Lansbury and then Carrie, that was my first Sondheim Broadway experience.
It was my first Sondheim musical as well. I grew up in Los Angeles, and my Broadway experience was the Schubert Theater that used to be here in Century City. And that's where I saw Chorus Line, which opened my eyes to the world of musical theater. And then I got the privilege of telling Steve, because I got to know him a little bit, one time when I was invited to his home, he asked how I got into his music. And I said, well, it was a Chorus Line, in which he joked, one of my best shows. And I said, but I said that was the gateway drug to lead me to religion, which was Sweeney Todd.
Wow, well put.
So I,
Bet he
so
loved
I,
that.
so I totally get it. Now, the interesting thing about Sondheim, which I find your recording completely upends in a beautiful way, is that he was very careful to write songs that were so closely intertwined with the book of the musical and specific to the characters that he was writing about. So what was the structure and the process of building the structure to come up with something that was autobiographical for you so that you could express your life through Stephen Sondheim's music?
Great question. As a performer in, nightclubs or cabaret, whatever you want to call that, I am the narrator. I am, when I'm up there, whatever I'm singing, whether it's Cole Porter, Cy Coleman, Sammy Kahn, some of the other favorites that I love. I am, it is my story that I'm telling. So I always begin with lyrics, and Sondheim's lyrics, I just started combing through them for where do I find my story here? And I found it quite a bit and quite a few songs. And they do live interestingly outside of the context. That was the other thing. I was exactly what you were saying, is really to try and express them in a way perhaps radically differently to how they were used in the context of a show, but authentically to my life. John Weber, my musical arranger, the dazzling jazz virtuoso, was such a wonderful collaborator to work with, because I could really say to him, I hear, for me, losing my mind is, the tick, tick, tick of the, the steady beat of the leader of the pack kind of thumping of obsession. And, he came up with this setting that just feels exactly how the truth of that song is for me.
Well, I want to get into some specific songs in a minute, but since you brought up the arrangements, I think the arrangements and the orchestrations are really well done. And what
Didn't he do a great job? That's his first time orchestrating.
Such a great job, but if you know Sondheim's music, you don't just have the songs that are listed on the song titles there. There are phrases from other songs built into the arrangements. It feels like you've created Easter eggs amongst the arrangements for Sondheim fans to go, oh, wait, there's a phrase from, and then, you figure out what it is. I assume that was very intentional.
Oh, of course. I mean, we love doing that. That's, yes, I always hope with my shows that they at least work on the level that if you've never heard of whoever I'm singing, the music will be accessible, and hopefully entertaining. But for those who know the material, there should be lots of layers of identification. So yes, there are lots of Easter eggs.
So were those his idea to add those phrases in, or did you say, God, it would be really great if we could do this, but there's just not enough room, and I'd like to pay an homage by having a phrase from this song here or that song there?
There's I would say we collaborated on that, but every arrangement I brought to him, I came to him with the songs picked and so a lot of those little quotes that you hear, we did discuss, but a lot of them are his, yeah, he's kind of a savant as far as music goes. Once he's heard it, he retains it, and it will come out in unexpected ways. And he also, I had never really worked with a jazz musician before like him, and so there's an improvisational element always. I'm always being surprised. So yeah, he's wonderful.
Did you find you had to make any real substantive changes to any of the songs beyond pronouns?
Well, the primary change that we've made, and that we lived in terror when Sondheim came to see the show, is that he's so specific about the voicings and harmonies of his songs. And my understanding until he came to see the show was that we were probably doing something that he would find not to his liking. I anticipated that he would think it was too disrespectful, perhaps, to how he intended the songs to be. He came because Stephen Holden in the New York Times reviewed KT and me with a headline that said "Sex Role Reversals in Sondheim," and within 2 weeks, Stephen Sondheim was emailing me. So I can call him Steve too, because that's what he said, but that he wanted to come. And I can just tell you, one-on-one, that he came way too soon to see me, because he literally came to my second or third time ever performing his music. And there he was. And I just could hardly inhale oxygen, let alone, I mean, I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. He was very gracious about what he saw that night, and very gracious to remain kind of an email pen pal right up to the end of his life, and in communications about this album and this show. So I don't even remember what your question was, but yes, what he said to John Weber, and I'll never forget it, was he did say, I loved this about him. He said, when I come to your show, I'm going to sit upstairs till the lights come down, and then someone can bring me into the back of the room, because if people see me come in, or I'm seated anywhere but the very back, they'll watch me watching you, and that wouldn't be good for either of us. But he did say, after the show, you can come over and we'll talk. And I said, could we take a picture? And he said, yes. But the first thing he said to John Weber was, I loved the changes, and I wished there were more. Which I was like, okay, wow. So I think John delivered with the orchestrations. I think he gave. I wish that Steve had lived to hear those orchestrations.
Well, that means, I guess, there could be an album, More of My Life, through Sondheim's music. You never know. You could do a sequel and give him what he asked for. You never know. Do you see the album? Do you see the album as having, a chronological point of view, or is it more just episodes from life?
It's truthfully more episodic of life, though. There definitely is the arc that my director is the wonderful Sandra Lee, 91-year-old Tiger Lily in Peter Pan. I mean, I knew her name when I was 5. so that she's directing the show is astonishing. But we are very mindful about the innocence and discovery of the beginning of the journey to the all the complications along the way, and then to what I believe for me is the resolution, which and I know things now means 2 very different things separated by 50 minutes. So but as far as how things happen in my life, it's not necessarily in a chronological order. Gets there toward the end, though. So,
yeah. The reason I ask is because you get to Loving You from Passion, which I recently got married. At the end of
congratulations.
Thank you. And I was looking for some poetry to be recited, and I looked at Loving You, and I thought, not much reason to rejoice is not something you say at a wedding.
Good call.
No, the reason I ask is because Loving You and Losing My Mind come so early.
Yes.
In the process, I'm just wondering, God, did something go bad that quickly?
It harkens back, without naming names, to the obsessive kind of love that I felt as a younger gay man. When I first understood my sexuality and first got to New York, and was in my 30s, when I fell in love, it was a kind of obsession. I mean, I'm sure you would agree. Well, I don't know if you'd agree, but the musical passion could be called obsession, is how I feel about it. And that song just speaks to, and so does Losing My Mind. Something that I identify with in my youth, which is not to say I don't get hooked in my dotage here at age 63. People, I can still have obsessive thinking about people, but it's not like that. It's not there is more balance in my life, so it doesn't just become, oh my God, I wake up and I'm thinking about you, and even though you might treat me indifferently, and there's not much reason to rejoice about how I'm going to be there. I'm not quite that guy anymore, at least in this usage of the song. So it is a younger me.
I will tell you that I chose "Take Me to the World" for the recitation in the wedding,
that's beautiful.
which I thought would be a much better choice for a wedding than "Loving You."
Yes.
Now, near the end of your album, and I'm not trying to do a psychological profile of you here, but what goes on in your life that the Ballad of Sweeney Todd is part of your perspective of your life? Who did you want to? I assume there was somebody you wanted to kill.
Well, you and I were chatting before this interview began. I am in recovery from all through my life, from the age of 19 till I was 51. I have dealt with a major eating disorder, a major alcohol problem, and ultimately a major drug addiction that finally got me to the help I needed to get. So that's the sad part, but the good part. If I couldn't figure it out at first, I'm really grateful to have figured it out at last. But what precipitated that getting sober thing was a particularly horrific kind of nightmare, and it was wrapped around a relationship. And it's not that that song allows me to give voice to the rage. It's another Sandra Lee is in this. She's always tell the truth, state the facts, and where's the anger? She loves the humor and all of that, but it's like, where is the anger? And that it took a particular kind of rage. Both the song that precedes it as well, the Could I Leave You, all have to do with reaching a breaking point where it was either save my life or or die with.
I appreciate you being candid about that, and I guess if it had gone a different direction, you would be singing Epiphany.
That's right.
I feel like we're doing inside Sondheim baseball talk here on a certain level.
I love it. You're a good pitcher.
I'm not touching that line.
Yeah, I know. Fill in your own punchline.
Exactly. Where's your drummer now?
All I can say is you're blushing.
It's yes, never mind. So I love the fact that Roadshow is included. I think that's You're the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, I think, is an incredible song.
It really is.
But there are also shows that aren't included. Shows like Assassins and Pacific Overtures. And I'm wondering, was it a matter of timing? You could only have so long a project, and there were countless other songs that maybe came from those shows, or even from some of the shows you already use, that it was a matter of just getting it right down to the tightest possible? Or was there no room for something from those shows because thematically they didn't offer what you were looking for?
Thematically, they did not leap to the essential list. And yes, in most venues that I perform in, the show is 60 to 70 minutes long. So I have performed it in venues where they ask for 2 acts, and we do have other songs that we can fill in. There's also something wickedly lovely that you would love, I know, at the that we do as an encore. There's a genius named Rick Crom who wrote his version of Sondheim's Oklahoma, and it's just 4 little song snippets of What a Beautiful Morning, and I Can't Say No, and Surrey with a Fringe on Top in Oklahoma, as if Sondheim had written them. And we do that as a little encore party favor. So there is other material. I admire. I've never seen Assassins, so it's just not. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. And Pacific Overtures, I didn't really find the lyrics that seemed spot on where I was the reliable narrator.
Well, I guess it's a sign of the healthy place that you find yourself in, that you chose not to put "I'm unworthy of your love." I think that says the absence of that song says as much as the inclusion of many others, I think.
That's great. I'm going to talk to you when we put Act 2 together. No, that's great.
Now,
yes.
So Sondheim didn't come out until very late in his life, and he didn't really find true love until very late in his life. Do you think there's a subtext that's been a part of his songs that's been there all along, and we just don't pay attention to it because we're caught up in the shows in which they appear?
One of the most interesting interviews I read about him was where he specifically said, "Do not read into my lyrics as a psychology of me, because I immerse myself in the characters and I write in the character's voice." And I think he makes a valid argument there. So I can't say, it's not for me to say. What I will tell you is his husband's name is Jeff. And ever since we became email pen pals, he inadvertently my name will fill in when he was meaning to write to his husband. So there were several emails that I got that weren't intended for me that I had to write back and say, another 100 Jeffs, but this isn't the right one. And he'd write back, "Oi," or "Oi, please don't share the content." So I don't know. I take him at his word that he and it's certainly there in the evidence that these songs he is almost a librettist with the ability he had to write from a character's point of view. But yeah, you have to wonder at the choices he made in projects as he evolved. I don't think he could have written Passion any earlier in his life, in his career. So it's a good question.
Well, but clearly you saw something in it. You heard something in it. It spoke to you.
Oh my gosh. Listening to that score for the first time, yes, it sure did. Because that's how I would feel about the unfortunate men in my life. Yeah, it was exquisite writing.
Well, but also remember what Stephen Sondheim wrote in Move On. "I chose and my world was shaken, so what? The choice may have been mistaken, the choosing was not."
That's right.
Which to me is, I probably say this in way too many interviews if Sondheim comes up, but to me that is that is as profound as anything I've ever heard in my life.
Here. I hear, and that's also you have to believe that's part of him crying out about his artistic choices, because he certainly didn't choose the easy path, artistically, commercially.
Well, and certainly the opening of Act 2 of Sunday in the Park with George is a full statement about that. With art isn't easy. You're putting together. So how does this album and your show resonate with you in the 10 months since Sondheim passed away?
Well, I'm wildly disappointed selfishly that he didn't live 16 days longer to come to the show. The last email he wrote was 16 days before he passed, because I was checking in to let him know that my show was was coming, was the next night. Yeah, I wrote to him. Yeah, it was the next night was my show, and I just wrote to see, tell him I was still holding a ticket, and he wrote back and said, "I've just sprained my ankle, and I'm not only missing your show, I'm missing press previews of Company, and I'm missing press previews of Assassins. I'm stuck in Connecticut. But thank you for doing the show," was the last word. So yeah, there'll always be that wish that he had come. And there's also that I did not have the sense it was going to happen. There was no indication that he was in declining health. So it really surprised me. So that part of it seems unfair to the world, that we didn't have a sense, the time to do the outpouring of love while he might be bedridden and at least able to hear us, and then, of course, well, we were talking about Judy Garland earlier. I wasn't, an adult when she passed, but my manager, when I started in New York, described to me how, this is a really random comparison, has nothing to do with Stephen Sondheim, but he just said, that Garland at the end of her career, where she would be booed and she couldn't finish performances or would cancel and was waif-like on stage and, sounded, he said the moment she passed, that was forgotten. And all of a sudden, everyone was there with the bouquets of what a genius we had. They remembered her in Star is Born. She was robbed of that Oscar. I mean, it just, and I feel like that with Sondheim. It's like all of a sudden, the world is recognizing what we had, and it's and that's beautiful. I love that there's celebrations everywhere. I love that he's. I mean, we're about to get Sweeney Todd again. The revivals keep coming into the woods. It's miraculous. So I don't know what your original question was, but I miss it, and it breaks my heart that we're not going to give us more to hear. I can't say that to him anymore.
Well, the nice thing is he got to live long enough for people to catch up to his show, so that there could be revivals of Assassins and people get it. There could be, revivals or on-course productions of Merrily We Roll Along, and people go, there's more here than we thought. Let alone,
that's coming to Broadway, isn't it? Is Merrily coming back to Broadway?
There's discussion of it. We'll see. I mean, there's been discussion,
and it's going to work this time.
Yeah, and there's been
anything.
A discussion of Andrew Lloyd Webber turning A Star is Born into a musical on stage. Who knows? We won't go down that path.
However, I saw Cinderella and really enjoyed it.
Good. I haven't seen it, but I do know it's on its way to New York, I believe, this season. But let's stick to Mr. Sondheim, and I want to ask you about something he said in a 2017 interview that he gave New York Times Magazine for an interview that Lin-Manuel Miranda did with him. And he said, "You've got to work on something dangerous. You have to work on something that makes you uncertain, something that makes you doubt yourself." How did your album, I Know Things Now, check off all those boxes for you? And what have you learned in the process of creating, performing, and recording it?
I'm blown away by that. I am. That's exactly what this project is. The courage that it took, on the level of just singing his material and trying to feel worthy as a vocalist, to the point of view I was taking with his material, and the self-exposure for me. I have never stood in front of an audience before and sung about loving a man. Never. And I'm about to do the show in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have no idea how it's going to play there. I know that the musicians and I'll have a great time, but I have no idea if it's going to look like Springtime for Hitler there in that audience, or but I feel, the embrace that I've gotten everywhere that I've gone so far with the show, has been extraordinary. And the exhilaration that I get, for being this particularly authentic is unlike any other performing experience I've ever had. There's no waffling about performer pronouns and stuff. It's not that I've ever denied my sexuality. I just have been crafty about choosing my songs up until now. And yeah, so it ticks off all those boxes. And I hope it's interesting because it's received a level of notice. I think for the very reasons he just said. I really need to get that interview and put that back stage on my mirror before I go on. That's beautiful. It does tick those boxes each time.
He was pretty good with words.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so
And
much.
you got to go in the house. That's so amazing. It's 10 blocks from where I live. Literally, I walk by it all the time. I stand on the street and just look at the back of his head at his desk. I mean, I really, I miss that. I miss just walking by and knowing that he's there.
Yeah. Well, I hope at some point, he claimed not to have much of a trunk of unused songs, but I'm betting that there's a treasure trove somewhere. There maybe not be songs that he was thrilled with in the context of shows, but that doesn't mean they can't work outside the context of those shows. So we'll see.
Yeah, I have my aunt was a wonderful painter, and after she passed, we've discovered that even though there were lots of canvases, she didn't sign them unless she thought they were finished. So I hope, that whatever is unearthed, he felt was ready to be heard. But yeah, let's bring it on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time, Jeff. Are you comfortable hosting this interview on our YouTube channel?
Oh, I'd be honored.
All right.
Yes.